Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Realm of History. Tonight, we're here for a special live review, getting ready for the Chapter 20 quiz. Chapter 20 is a really big picture chapter. I'm pretty fired up about it. Seems like we've been covering Chapter 20 for about 3 weeks, but finally get to assess what you've learned and what you know. Think about all the big picture topics in Chapter 20. Columbus, Magellan, the discovery of the Americas for Europeans, sailing and circumnavigating the globe. You also have the fur trade. You got the French and Indian War. You've got the conquest of the Aztec, conquest of the Inca. You've got mercantilism, capitalism. You've got the Columbian Exchange. So many big picture things to be fired up about and making sure that we're ready to go. Before we start into our live review tonight, I want to remind you about the food drive, right? This is really imperative. For you youngsters on campus, this is something we've been doing for 20 years. Like, we did the food drive when I was a student at St. Mary's as a class of 2000. So this is a really big deal. Really want to see everybody buy in and come together as a community to show just how fortunate we are and how gracious and how charitable we as a professional learning community at St. Mary's can be. Do you remember when we learned about the Protestant Reformation and the difference between Catholicism and some other faiths about how you get to heaven? The Catholic Church teaches that it's through faith, but also good works. And here's a great chance, a great opportunity to express that ideology of good works, of giving back, of helping others that are less fortunate than us. We are so blessed, as we always say, to be sitting here tonight worrying about a quiz, right? Where others that we're going to help with our food drive are worried about what they're going to eat tonight, tomorrow, where they're going to sleep, how they're going to get out of this cold weather, right? So those are some of the things that we can play a part in helping those people. And I really would encourage you to do that. And if you want to help the Athletes for Christ deliver the food, you have a great opportunity because you're going to be on campus for the sophomore retreat. And we are going to deliver that day right after the retreat ends. We're going to load up a 20-foot U-Haul, take it down to Sister Judy's and deliver it. And it is such a good feeling. It's probably one of my favorite days of the year, being on campus, being a part of St. Mary's, is doing the Sister Judy delivery for the food drive. It's just such a great feeling to know that you're making a difference and you're helping somebody else out, giving back and being a student for others. All right, now on to the real topic of tonight's lesson, and it's really to get ready for the quiz. Of course, you want to study your notes. We talked about this. We talked about those students who have been performing well. They're taking notes. They're reading those notes. They're taking notes on these sessions. I see that work. I think it really is beneficial. Reading through your outline several times through, using the review sheet to quiz yourself, making note cards on ones that you might not have grasped very well. Those are all key criteria to getting yourself ready for the quiz. Number 2, make sure you're praying for the right things. We just talked about this, right? We are so fortunate. Instead of praying for success on this quiz, pray for the many, many more important things, like your health and safety, like the health and safety of your families. Say the prayer of gratitude. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for giving me such a wonderful position, such a wonderful life, and just all the blessings that have been bestowed upon you, and ask for guidance. Ask to use your talents to the fullest. I think those are always great ways to get yourself ready and create a connection with God. Number 3, be here now, right? Tomorrow's going to be a challenge. I'm always coming to challenge you as best as I can. There's a lot of things that we talked about in chapter 20. There was a lot of AP AMSCO reading. So that tomorrow is going to be a challenge just in the full scope of things. So be here now, focus on the task at hand. When you come in the realm, let's get back to popping history in, right? Let's focus on the task at hand. Then I also want to encourage you tonight. Now, one of the more important things that I always talk about is to make sure you say thank you to your parents, right? Before you go to bed tonight, before you do your next task, if you need to stop what you're doing right now, go say thank you to your parents. I think that's really, really important. Express the gratitude to them because they've made a lot of sacrifices to you for you to be in the situation that you're in. Finally, hey, I want to be in school tomorrow. Man, I really want to be there because I love what I'm doing. I love my job. I love my students. So I want to see you there too. Let's rise to the occasion. You know, there's going to be a challenge. We need to meet the challenge. We don't want to shy away from challenges. We don't want to be Skipper McGee's, right? Don't be a Skipper McGee. That's the worst thing you can do. Let's be there, show up, rise to the occasion, and let's get the job done tomorrow. I'm looking for really good quiz scores tomorrow. Okay, I kind of asked a lot of my classes what they really wanted me to focus on tonight. So I've got some of those in the key terms and figures. So let's go over those together just to make sure that I got you covered. And if you have any questions at the end, of course, I will be there to answer those. Let me know that you're here in the comments. I really like to know who's showing up and how they do on the quizzes. If you can't put a comment, maybe one of your friends can give you a shout out to let me know that you are participating tonight. Here we go with the joint stock companies, right? This is like the earliest form of a modern corporation where investors would buy shares of stock in a company. Now, most of the companies and the investments back in the 1600s involved overseas exploration and funding of colonies, and oftentimes funding of colonies in the Americas. But we did also learn in this chapter the Philippines became a Spanish colony. Japan, China, they had opened up for trade. Magellan circumnavigates the globe. He dies in the Philippines, for example. But so those eventually became colonies that were funded by joint stock companies, which are kind of like where you put in a percentage of the overall cost, and then you get that much in profits if they strike it rich. A lot of questions today about the African style of slavery or Muslim slavery versus the American system of slavery. The AMSCO book, if you did the reading, talks a lot about this chattel slavery, which is the American style versus the Islamic style. So if you've done that reading, you probably have a step ahead, which is great. That's why I assigned the reading. So it kind of comes together. But the main difference is the harsh treatment in the American system. You know, the American system, slavery was where it's hereditary. So if you're a slave, your children are going to be a slave. And there's very limited social mobility. So there's a very limited way to move up or down in the social class system as a slave. Whereas in the Muslim version, loyalty, good service could get you out of that state of slavery. So there are some major differences between the two styles. All right, moving on down the list. One of the things that a couple of kids asked about today were the encomienda system. This is a Spanish system of forced labor, and it put Native Americans to work first as slaves in mines and fields, provided a very cheap labor source for colonization. Eventually, though, natives die off due to disease or they run away because they know the land very well. And so there's a necessity, according to the Europeans, to replace them. And that's what really kind of starts the African slave trade. Because the natives were dying off due to disease, they didn't have enough workers in the colonies. And so they turned to African slaves in the Atlantic slave trade. That's really one of the unfortunate things that was going on. Natives were dying due to disease. They were being enslaved. And then Africans were being enslaved, starting with the Portuguese. Next is mercantilism. Mercantilism was a key concept that we introduced in section 4. It's an economic theory that a country's power depends mainly on its wealth. And so what mercantilist countries in Europe would do is they would try to get as much gold as possible. So they would do it in a couple of ways. One way was to exploit colonies, and the other one was to establish a favorable balance of trade, which meant they were selling or exporting more goods than they were importing or buying from other countries. A lot of questions about inflation today. This is something that we've already learned about in the past. We learned about what inflation was, but inflation in this chapter is basically it's a decrease in the value of money coupled with or paired with an increase in the price of goods. So that's kind of a double negative for the consumer, right? I mean, your money is worth less, but also the price of goods is going up, and so that is problematic. The reason that caused this is all of the gold and silver, which was the form of currency in Spain, boatloads of it is coming in from the Americas. So it made that entity of money less rare and so therefore less valuable. All right, a couple key figures that were asked about. Vasco da Gama today. We know Vasco da Gama. He is the Portuguese sailor that basically sailed the first direct route to India, to the port of Calicut, which is where a lot of the spices were being traded, at the port of Calicut in India. Ferdinand Magellan, we talked about him in section 1. Talked about him actually on our team's meeting a while back, but Magellan and his crew was the first to circumnavigate the globe. So they're the first to sail all the way around the world. He was killed in the Philippines after getting involved in a local war there. But this trip took about 3 years, 1519 to 1522. So as Cortez was conquering the Aztec in Mexico, Magellan was making this trip almost at the same exact time. There was about 2 questions about this key figure named Metacom. Metacom is also known as King Philip. Now, he's a Native American chief that led a rebellion, a successful rebellion in North America along the East Coast. And the English, they called him King Philip because he actually looked like the king of Spain at that time, which was Philip. Host of questions about global trade. Global trade is really, really basic. It basically is what it sounds like. It's trade that expanded worldwide with the shipment of goods traveling across oceans and waterways from continent to continent. A word that is used in the AMSCO that I like is transoceanic trade. And that's another way to look at it. It's trade that spans through 2 or more oceans. There you go. Okay, revisiting the Treaty of Tordesillas, right? The Treaty of Tordesillas, it involves the line of demarcation, and these things were actually taught in chapter 19, but they're relevant here. So they're linked heavily to occurrences in chapter 20, and there may be questions about those things on the quiz. All right. Oh, wait, what? What's that? Okay. All right. Yeah, gotcha. I'm going to go to commercial break here real quick.
Hey, y'all, this here's Trapper John. It's been a minute. Been missing y'all, but hey, we're back here today for a special message. I got this here coat from that there fur trade y'all been learning about back there in the 1700s. I got this there from them Iroquois native tribe, from the French and Indians, and going ahead and wear that thing. It's pretty cold out there. But I'll tell you what, I've been willing to talk to Mr. Langle. He's been really working on that food drive, trying to get a whole bunch of donations in there. And I told him, I said, why don't you have all the Realm family just go ahead and bring on in them goods tomorrow, and then that way you can give them all extra credit. So I said, Mr. Langle, go ahead and give them kids some extra credit. And he said, I don't know. Anyway, here's the proposal. If all members of the Realm family have donated or donate tomorrow, then y'all gonna get +1 extra credit on that there quiz. Good luck. Be here now and rep that Realm.
Trapper John with some bold words right there. Where's Trapper John been? All of a sudden he comes back trying to give out extra credit. I don't know. I told him no, but I guess I have to honor that. Trapper John's a pretty famous guy in the realm. But if we all can bring in our donations tomorrow, I'm looking for bags, for boxes of items that are on the list. If you're not sure what the list is, hey, let me know. I'll help you out. I got it. But listen, this is really important, and it's going to help a lot of people. So I'm willing to, if we get 100% donated from the Realm family, okay, yeah, you guys can all have +1, but I'll be checking. I'm going to go to the classroom teachers and see if all of you guys donated. So we'll see if it works out. But nonetheless, that's the ideology there. Okay, I'm going to go to next. I want to see some comments. It looks like a lot of people are checking in. I really do really appreciate that. Let me just check that real quick. Thank you for checking in with me. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you are as excited as I am about this quiz tomorrow and are ready to rock and roll. Nonetheless, what I want to do next is I want to go to some short answer notes and some AP advice. So I'm going to get my sheet here. One of the key things that was asked about a lot is if I would go over some of the notes that I have in on the review sheet. So I'm willing to do that, and then I'll open up for questions here momentarily. But number 4 on the notes was one that was asked about quite a bit. Be able to describe the consequences of the Atlantic slave trade. So you want to talk about this from an African perspective and then an American perspective, right? And understand that consequences just mean things that happen because of something else, right? There's a cause and effect relationship there. It doesn't always mean that consequences are negative things, okay? But nonetheless, in Africa, most of the consequences were negative because what happened is they lost their most fit members of society, which are being sold off into the slave trade, which really hurt native tribes in Africa. Then what were they trading for to get slaves? Guns and gold, right? If tribe A gets guns through the slave trade and tribe B and C don't have any guns, what happens when they go to war is that tribe B and C get entirely wiped out. Prior to that, tribal warfare, you might have some casualties, but we're not talking about an entire tribe dying when one has guns and the other doesn't, right? So that's a major problem that was caused by Europeans intervening in Africa. All right, on the other end of that spectrum in America, you have the forced labor of millions of people, right? The forced migration and the forced labor of millions of people, which really built our country. So that's not always a great way to start a country. I mean, when you're enslaving people, any way you look at slavery, it's wrong, whether it's the Islamic version, the American version, whether it's feudalism. I mean, when somebody's owned by another, it's inherently wrong. So that's one thing that you got to think about there as well. Okay, next on the notes, it'd be number 5, and that is to be able to compare the Native American relationships with the French and the English. And what we learned about in lesson is that Native American relationships with the French was pretty good, were pretty good. And it was based on the fur trade, right? They were mutually benefiting. Natives were getting horse, guns, metal cookware in exchange for beaver pelts. And so one of the key things that we have to understand there is that the French and the natives had a pretty good working relationship due to the fur trade, which is also known as the middle ground in many cases. On the other end of the spectrum, you also have to think about the fact that the French were not really bringing that many people to the Americas, so they weren't a real big threat to stay, settle, conquer. Whereas the British, the English, were bringing many people over to the Americas looking to stay, conquer, settle, expand. So they formed a much bigger threat to native peoples. Number 6, I'll be able to list and explain the 7 key factors that led to the Spanish conquest of the Aztec. In your notes, I really detailed these. I talked a long time about these 7 key factors. These are basically my original thoughts in an essay, in a thesis essay that I wrote on this topic in college. But I'm going to share them with you again. I'm not going to explain them. I'm going to leave that up to your notes and you, but I'm going to list them for you just in case you are confused. The first one is the Quetzalcoatl theory. You should know what that is by now. If you don't, you need to look in your notes. Number 2, the second one is the fact that the Spanish eventually made alliances with native tribes that hated the Aztec. So these native tribes were enemies actually of the Aztec. They were paying massive amounts of tribute to the Aztec. Number 3 is a very simple one, steel armor and weaponry. The Spanish had it, the natives didn't. Number 4, the horse, same thing. It was a big fear factor. Spanish had it, natives didn't. It was a tactical advantage. Number 5, the translators. I told the whole story about La Malinche, about Aguiar, and how they had to use 2 translators to get back and forth between Cortez and Montezuma at all times. Number 6, battle tactics. Remember, natives, especially the Aztec, they were trying to capture their opponent, whereas the Spanish were trying to just straight kill their opponent. And so those 2 things, that's going to go Spanish advantage there. Then finally, the overarching factor was disease. Disease in the form of smallpox killed off millions of natives, millions of Aztecs. Over 90% of Aztecs died due to smallpox, not from warfare. So that was really the biggest factor in all of it, if you want to take a look at it. But you want to know those 7 key factors for sure. Okay, on to the AP advice. I'm going to keep it fairly brief. They are MCQs, but I want to throw some keywords at you. Here. Here they are. These words, knowing about them, what's written about them in AMSCO will be helpful to you on the questions. But really, you need to see the prompts to be able to answer and decipher what you want to know. So the first key word that I want to say is migration. Migration was key, right? And the form of migration that was happening is people coming from Europe and Africa to the Americas. What were the consequences of that, right? What did it lead to? Did it lead to disease? That's the next key word, disease, right? What impact did disease have? How big of a deal was it? Who brought it? Who was impacted by it, right? Did native diseases really impact Europeans, or was it vice versa? Those are the things that you're going to want to take a look at. Obviously, I don't think you can talk about anything in this chapter without mentioning the Atlantic slave trade. So that's a key word that you're going to need to know. And in particular, the Middle Passage. Now, I assigned section 3, and you guys did the notes on what a treacherous journey the Middle Passage was, right? Some African peoples on those ships, they had learned, and stories came to them about what happens when you get to the Americas, and they decided to jump overboard and die rather than be enslaved. So many people died on the Middle Passage. It was not easy to live on a ship in the type of conditions that they were sequestered to. Look in your book in section 3 and look how they put African peoples at the bottom of the boats, and look how they made them lay on the floor in a certain pattern, making sure they had just a sliver of space in between each other. Think about that, living in that type of proximity for 2.5 months on a ship. This is not something that you volunteer for, okay? This is a forced journey, and it's not a nice one. And so I think that one's going to be a key idea in some of your recollections and some of your prompts that you're going to have for the MCQs. And then finally, what were Native and African slaves forced to do? Mine in the gold mines, in the silver mines, and then farm on plantations. So this was not easy labor. So those are some of the key things that you're going to want to make sure you have an understanding of going into tomorrow's AP portion. Okay, now I've been talking for about 22 minutes. So I'm going to open up for the question and answer session. I'm going to go to the comments. Let's go ahead and let me know what you guys think. And hey, I'll do the best I can to answer your questions. Not quite seeing any questions coming in. I'll wait a few minutes. Okay, we got Gabby the Gabby. Okay, I would say, so that's a great question, Gabby. I would say more so for the content portion, more so for the content portion. Yes. Okay, moving down. All right, so, okay, Kenzie, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you more than you need to know, but I think that's for your own good. I'm going to say you should know 8 each way. No 8, you can't go wrong there. No 8 going to the Americas, no 8 going out of the Americas, and you should be good. Avery, great question. Will there be a map or picture MCQ prompts? Good. There's one. Let me just double check. I know for a fact there's a chart. I'm going to look through them right now. I got a chart on there, and that's going to be the one about the Atlantic slave trade. It deals with numbers, population, how many were being transported, things of that nature. The rest are documents for the prompts. So it looks like you got one prompt that is a chart/graph, and the other 4 are documents, or like primary sources, secondary sources. Yeah. Okay, Izzy. It just means the names of the diseases. Like when I say a form of disease, if I said influenza is a form of disease, so just knowing that list, going from the world coming into the Americas, like diphtheria, typhoid fever, measles, smallpox, right? That's just what you want to know. Those are the forms of disease. And going the opposite way, there was syphilis from natives to Europeans. Gasco, brilliant analogy there. However, the encomienda system was utilized by the Spanish. It's very similar to the Midas system. It is a forced labor tribute system, so that's really good that you've made that analogy. But the encomienda system the difference is it's employed by the Spanish, and they didn't copy the Inca. This is something that they've done in many colonies. So if you want to say it replaced the Mita system, yes, that would only be correct though in Peru and Chile, where the Inca homeland is. This is also something employed in Mexico, Colombia, eventually Argentina. So I can't say it replaced the Mita system anywhere except for in Peru and Chile. Very smart, very smart. I'm going to say for the quiz, probably not, Alyssa. There are some that you do need to know. Like if they're on the review sheet, you want to know them, right? If they're on the review sheet, you want to know them. And notice that a lot of the French explorers, like Samuel de Champlain, like Jacques Cartier, are not on the review sheet. So the ones that I put on the review sheet are the ones that you want to roll with for like the most knowledge pertinent for tomorrow's quiz. All right. Great question, Reese. Yeah, I mean, I went into a lot of detail. This is because something that I've studied a lot and I was pretty fired up to teach it. As far as like being able to tell me all of that story back's not necessary, but just knowing that there needed to be two translators to get from Cortez to Montezuma and vice versa would be, what you would want to know. And you want to know how important that communication was. So that's really the big picture idea there. I wouldn't say you should be able to retell the whole story for this test in particular. Could it help you on a DBQ or an SAQ to get like a complexity point later on when you're on the AP exam? Yeah. So trying to make that, build that ladder to get to that good grade on the AP exam, it's necessary there. For the quiz tomorrow, probably won't be a big impact. Yeah. So here, Audrey, you're going to want to know some of those specific details. Like, why was it that? What are some of the 7 factors, right, that led to the Aztec being able to defeat, or the Spanish being able to defeat the Aztec? And then with Peru, yeah, I mean, you want to know, like, they followed a format. They captured Atahualpa, they held him for ransom, they got the gold out of it, and then they ended up killing him anyway, which caused the Inca to go into a state of civil war. So, yeah, understanding the details there, I think is going to be imperative. Yeah, there's several questions that will hit at that. Yeah, the Costa system was a key term in AMSCO, and it was later on in that area where you might have a question. So, yeah, Costa system, it talked about the fact that you have mestizos and mulattoes, which I also mentioned in our learning briefly. And I talked about how the Spanish had this racial hierarchy system. So that's the Costa system. That's what it's called. And so that's really what it's talking about there. So that is a possibility as a question on the vocabulary, because that was a key bolded term in 4.5 through 4.8. Yeah. So, Gabby, even though Vasco da Gama is really more of a player in chapter 19, like his route, a direct route to India to the port of Calicut for the spice trade, is what causes Columbus, Magellan, Henry Hudson to try and find an alternative route that would be faster, or one that they could claim to compete with his route, right? So really, that's really the essence of everything we learned about in this chapter. It all stems from his discovery and other European entities trying to either match or overcome that route. So that's why he's so important here, is because his discovery, his direct route to India, really causes almost all of the other events in this chapter. So it's a really big cause and effect relationship, which is one of the 3 C's, if you remember. Yeah, Chloe, I mean, they're all important, right? They're all going to be assessed. But if I had to answer the question honestly, I would say 4.3 and 4.4 would hold the most possibility for questions being directed at. Yes. Yes, there are some very specific multiple choice questions that are going to assess do you know about those conquests? Yep. Yeah, I mean that's what started the Atlantic slave trade is basically slaves being sent to Brazil to work on sugar plantations. That's the Portuguese were really the first to enslave Africans and transport them to the Americas. That's definitely the case of what you would need to know there. 100% Emmy the Shea. Capitalism is a major term. We mentioned favorable balance of trade being something that drove mercantilism. So, yeah, there will be direct questions about both of those entities on the quiz, most likely in the multiple choice or matching. Yes. Yeah, I mean, if I were to say right now, I would say, when did the conquest of Mexico happen? 1519 to 1521. When did the conquest of the Inca happen? 1532, right? So some of those key dates are really important. 1492, Columbus makes his discovery. I mean, those are really important dates. So yeah, I'm going to say like those type of big events, you're going to want to know when those things happen. I don't think you need to say October 12th, Columbus, the Columbus reaches land or anything like that. I already promised you that you're never going to have to know, like for my quizzes, you're never going to have to know like a single day on the event, but years and time spans. Yeah, that's fair game for sure. And I think it's important to have that ideology in your mind. All right, well, some great questions that you came with today. I really appreciate that. I like the challenge of having to answer questions on the fly like that. That really keeps me fresh. So I do appreciate that. Hopefully that the answers were valid for you and you can use them tomorrow. I think I did a pretty good job there. I'm pretty confident in what happened tonight. Still time to ask questions if you need help. Otherwise, I want to say thank you to you. I'm really hoping that we have school tomorrow. Like I said, I love being there. But one of the key things is you got to be ready, right? You got to be ready. And everybody who's here, I'm really proud of you because you're here to learn. You're here to make sure you're doing the right thing. And that's what I do this for. It gives me a lot of gratitude to see students here coming on and putting in their due diligence. We got a new question here. How many goods from world to the Americas or the Americas to the world do we have now? I said eight. Eight going into the Americas, eight going to the rest of the world out of the Americas. That's a safe number. Like it's a safe number. Okay. Yeah. Other questions, other comments? If you have questions about something else, feel free to ask. Um, I'm here to help you in any way that I can. I mean, outside of like the normal stuff, not really. Not really. I've been working quite a bit, so I'll probably just relax a little bit. Maybe watch a history show. I like to watch like a show called Shogun on Hulu or something like that. That's related to the topic that we're learning about. I watch Marco Polo on Netflix. It's a nice series. Things of that nature. Just at the end of the day. But other than that, just pretty normal stuff. Yes, thank you, Gabby the Gabby. I love that. I love that a lot. Definitely bring those donations in. We need that. Yeah, Cece, I would say, 1519 to 1521, conquest of Mexico, 1532, conquest of course, the Inca, 1492, Columbus makes his expedition to the Americas. Master Colton and Master JT won't be there. We're not Skipper McGee's. Yeah, you guys got hockey. So good luck, man. Good luck. Give it your best shot. Be here now wherever you're at. But we will miss you. We will miss you. The book I was telling you about on the bookshelf. The Middle Ground. right? It's all about the French fur trade. That's what I was talking about right there. Yep, that's the middle ground, which is a reference to, as it says right here, Indians, empires, and republics in the Great Lakes region. So this is about the fur trade right here in Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana. That's the book I was talking about right there. Okay. Let's see. No, if you already donated, I can verify that with your first hour teacher, so you're good. What I'm saying is, if you haven't donated, let's get it in. If you want to donate more, we would appreciate it for sure. But yeah, this is a seventh hour thing. This is a seventh hour thing. All right, Stella. Nice. Yep, this is a third hour thing. Yes, that's a possibility. A third hour thing. Yeah. Anything else that I can help with? Gabby, did I answer the question right? Is that you remember we were talking about that in class? Am I on the same am I picking up what you're laying down there? Let me know. Hopefully that was what I was talking about. I think so. All right, looks like we've been uh here for 37 minutes. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, but really love all of you and just just so happy to be getting back in like a general routine. You know what I'm saying? And I like to get good continuity going. So hopefully we have a great quiz tomorrow and you guys can ball out of control and rep the realm. But for right now, I'm going to head out and I hope you have a wonderful night. Make sure you say thank you to your parents, pray for the right things, rise to the challenge tomorrow. Be here now.